back to the Sunday post-game edition, Power Cat Game Day. And, man, if you turn this one off at halftime yesterday, holy cow, what a crazy game. K-State wins 38-35, upsets the third-ranked Oklahoma Sooners. Easily, I think, a bigger, maybe more shocking upset than last time around beating the Sooners. K-State seems to have Lincoln Riley's number, down 28-7 in the third quarter. And, man, this game got really fun in the second half. 24 unanswered for the Cats, and a Blake Lynch 50-yarder, who had that one on their bingo card, is the final winning score for the Cats. How surprised are you for this turnaround for K-State, especially coming off just kind of like the heartbreaking loss in week number 1 for the Cats?
Well, I'm definitely surprised. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I expected that to happen, but I wasn't as down to the dumps after the first game. I wasn't packing in the season as much after the first game as a lot of people, because I think it's going to be, in general, a wacky, weird year of college football. I mean, just look at the entire scope of the day yesterday. I mean, you have Mississippi State going and beating LSU. You've had the Sun Belt stuff happen to the Big 12 in week 1, and now you're seeing teams like Iowa State bounce back and win. I mean, I think you're going to get a lot of that because of the situation that we're in, and college football was already a pretty topsy-turvy kind of a sport. So, I mean, having said all of that, it was incredible what they were able to do, especially, it wasn't so much to me just the fact that they turned around and won the game. It's that they turned around and won the game with kind of a skeleton crew in the secondary. I mean, the personnel issues that they were dealing with, guys like Echo Boydo, it still blows my mind that he played corner for an entire game and looked really good. Just a guy that's been in the program for a long time that you've never really heard much buzz about and has always been buried on the depth chart. You had Hunter Henry, like a walk-on safety transfer from Rice that no one really knew about, that was playing some in the secondary. It's the fact that they were able to do that and still win the game that is the crazy impressive part to me, and just showed a lot of guts, man. I mean, the way that the game went, having the Arkansas State game and then falling behind by 21 on 2 different occasions. After you get the big play, I think to Deuce for the touchdown that made it 28-14. 2 minutes later, they literally, it was 2:14. I think was that next drive. They're back up 35-14. I mean, to keep firing and keep going after that, based on everything that had happened to that point in the year, I think that's the most surprising part of it to me, and the most impressive part of it to me.
Yeah, I think it would have been pretty easy to pack it in when K-State got down by 21 in that third quarter, but they didn't, and they kept battling back. And to your point, John, I think I was shocked because we knew what K-State had missing in the secondary going into that game. Now, they had a couple guys that were questionable that we didn't know if they were going to get for sure, and Wayne Jones did play some after getting hurt against Arkansas State, and then Jahron McPherson, having him back. I don't think we can understate how huge Jahron McPherson was in that game, but also how big he is to this defense. The guy's a stud. He led the team with 11 tackles, obviously had the game-clinching interception. So that was an important piece to have back. But when we learned before kickoff that K-State was going to be down their top 2 corners opposite of A.J. Parker, and you're going to be throwing Boydo out there for really his first action in his career. And, I guess sometimes it's easy to forget. I guess he's only a sophomore. It feels like he's been here a lot longer than that. Jalen Pickle at defensive tackle. You're without Eli Huggins, one of your better defensive tackles, a starter. You throw Jalen Pickle in there really for his first significant action of his career. Another guy who feels like he's been in the program longer than he has, only a sophomore. And you start to, piece this together. You had 19 freshmen and sophomores play multiple snaps on the offensive and defensive side of the football yesterday. So many young, inexperienced guys were thrown on that football field. And a lot of them, the majority of them stepped up and played huge. K-State's secondary was phenomenal. Khalid Duke at defensive end, I think he was the best defensive lineman on either team on the field yesterday. He was in their backfield all day. You just have to feel really great for the team, the players, the coaches. They've been through a lot these last several months, just like everyone in this country. But these guys have been living in a bubble, perhaps more than the majority. And it's been a mental struggle for them. And they had some really important, powerful meetings after that Arkansas State game, as Derek Young at K-State Online told us, that were, very emotional meetings that they had. And they pulled it together and they righted the ship. And I think you saw some of the pictures after the game, and Chris Kleiman, hands on his knees on the field, that K-State tweeted out with just a sense of relief. And I thought that really depicted things well, that this has to be such a huge lift for the team and the coaches and the staff mentally to get a win like this and make it seem all worth it. Everything that they've done leading up to this, being in a bubble, all the sacrifices they're making. Winning a game like this just seems like it makes it worth it for them. And so it's got to be a huge mental lift moving forward for the team, and really help with the culture in the locker room.
So a lot of youth gets on the field, but the one guy that the Sooners have to be hoping doesn't take advantage of the freebie year and actually leaves for graduation is Skylar, who for the second year in a row gets the Sooners. Last year, it's a ton of running. This year, he's still coming off the groin injury in week number 1, which I think kind of got overlooked in his performance a little bit for week number 1. But, man, you want to talk about a dude who missed a couple throws early and then really puts it together. 18 of 25, 334. He gets 1 passing touchdown. A lot of short yardage work down by the goal line to score 3 rushing touchdowns. But you want to talk about a dude who hung in there, played through a calf injury during the game. How good was Skylar Thompson yesterday?
Well, this is one where I want to go back again to, hey, the first game of the year was your first game in a pandemic against a team that had already played and against a team that was capable. And it's easy to see how that happens. And then you turn around. I'm finishing a thought here, I guess, but I had someone ask me after the game, like, how does this happen? Like, how the hell do you lose to Arkansas State and then beat Oklahoma? I'm like, it makes more sense than you'd think, because I can explain very easily with what's happened in college football in the first game with teams that have played versus teams that haven't played, how you would lose that game. And then Oklahoma, they do have a new quarterback in Spencer Rattler, and K-State was able to really get to him. And then offensively, I think there's enough skill talent there for the offense to be dangerous. And that was something that I thought coming out of the first game, and Skylar was able to showcase a lot of that. And the piece that I'm getting to here about Skylar Thompson is I think we can look back now and say, hey, week 1, maybe we can chalk some of the throws that were missed by inches up to Skylar didn't have spring practice to work with these wide receivers. In fall camp, the weeks leading up to the game, the receivers were the position group hit hardest by COVID. So you didn't know what receivers were in practice. He hasn't had as much time to develop the chemistry to get on the same page as these guys. And Sebastian Taylor, it looks like he's the number 1 receiver right now, and that's a change from last year. So, yes, I'm sure they've thrown together before, but there's an extra level of chemistry that needs to be developed if he's really going to be your number 1 guy. So I'm not shocked, man. I'm not shocked. And Skylar has saved some of his best games of his career for big moments like this. He's now the only quarterback in school history to win 3 games against top 10 teams. He had the Oklahoma State game in 2017, the Oklahoma game last year, and the Oklahoma game this year. And, he was great. 18 of 25, 334 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks, 3 rushing touchdowns. Like you said, gutting it out when he had a groin injury last week, a calf injury, and he's clearly hobbled in this game. It was one of those middle finger type games from Skylar to all the haters out there, man. We'll see what happens the rest of the year. I know that Skylar's career path has been big time ups and downs, but I still think it's very much possible and very much out there that this turns into a year where he has taken a step. And it was everybody wanting to further their narratives in week 1 by saying, well, Skylar sucks because I didn't think he was that good. And they went out and lost to Arkansas State, and he had a couple of bad throws. I think let's just wait and see what happens here, because he still has time and room to develop.
Yeah, John, everything that Skylar Thompson does, it feels like it's magnified. So if he misses a throw or throws something slightly behind a receiver and it's dropped, like the Malik Knowles play yesterday that could have potentially been a touchdown, I felt like that got blown up, and everyone just expects the quarterback to hit on every single throw and is overly critical of it. And so, I think Skylar Thompson was really good yesterday, obviously, and I thought he was fine against Arkansas State. He wasn't great. He missed some throws, but again, like you said, there's rust. They haven't had a chance. They had 3 of their normal receivers out for that Arkansas State game. They hadn't been able, their receivers in practice, they'd been missing several guys. It's a timing thing for these quarterbacks, and to not have those guys and be able to get in sync and gel, it takes some time. And so, yesterday, Skylar Thompson really stepped up. You mentioned the 3 games against top 10 teams, and those 3 games, those 3 wins, 760 yards passing, 70% completion percentage, 12 touchdowns, 0 turnovers. Think about that. Oklahoma sure wants him gone. He's thrown for nearly 70% completion percentage the last 2 years and had 8 rushing touchdowns against them. I thought he was nails yesterday, especially in the second half. Now, yeah, they got a lot of big yards after the catch between Keon Mosey and Deuce Vaughn, obviously getting him in space. But, he delivered the ball in sync. They had 5 passing plays of over 30 yards, 2 over 70 yards. And I thought that was the story. If you look at the stats, who would have thought after the game that K-State would average 19 yards per completion and Oklahoma would average 13 yards per completion. K-State was the big play offense in that game. And they really got explosive plays. And I thought that was the key to getting them back in the game, was just those quick strikes. And I thought Skylar Thompson played his guts out. I mean, he was clearly banged up. He was banged up against Arkansas State. He was battling a calf injury yesterday that happened during the game as well. And just to see him, the way that he got in the end zone on a couple of those runs, and in particular, I'm thinking of the one where he just ran it up the middle and powered his way through a linebacker to get that extra yard and get into the end zone. You got to feel good for a guy like Skylar Thompson to get a win under his belt like that one. And now the thing is, like we talked about, he's been great in these types of games before. Now can he become more consistent, follow it up this Saturday against Texas Tech and have another really good game? That's kind of that next step, and hopefully that'll occur.
So the other thing that we saw as a change, especially in the second half, is that, you mentioned the inconsistency of practice time at receiver. Well, maybe the running backs are the best receivers on the team. And I don't know how you try to get the ball to Deuce more often, but you have to get the ball to Deuce more often. That dude is a star in the making. I think college football is falling in love with number 22. He's like the Austin Eckler of this offense. Not only is he a threat to score every time he handed off to him, but holy cow, get that dude in the slot and get him in space, because he just goes nuts. 174 total yards. And if you can throw it to him, he is a problem for opposing defenses. He's going to be fun to watch for the next several years.
Austin Eckler is a pretty good comp, actually. I like that. Yeah, I mean, Courtney Messingham was talking earlier this week, K-State's offensive coordinator, about the balance between not overloading him with touches, one, for his body's sake. I mean, this is a guy that in high school, not only is it a jump up from high school to college in terms of like the amount of games you're going to be playing, and but also he was just running through people. I mean, he just absolutely destroyed people. So I don't think his body was taking a lot of hits. They want to be careful with that, and they want him to be able to play fast. That was the word that they used there. Now, this schedule with some built-in buys, the way that things are going this year, will help. But I do think you're probably going to see it stay around 10 to 15 touches for him right now. But I love that they were using him a little bit more in the passing game. I think that really is the way to do it, especially if, seeing Jacardier Wright back out there was encouraging. Between he and Tyler Burns and maybe a little bit of Harry Trotter, you can still hand it off to them some and save Deuce for some of those moments. I think that's probably still going to be the equation going forward. But I tell you what, I mean, he has taken on everything they've given him and just been way more than I ever thought possible. And I think the thing that really impressed me was not only his speed, but he showed on a couple of occasions today that he has some strength to him. Like you see his size and you don't, we talk about the Darren Sproles comparison. And it's like, well, Darren Sproles was this, Mack truck in the weight room. Like he was ridiculous. But I tell you what, I mean, Deuce is stronger than you. I mean, the play in particular that I'm thinking of was a third down conversion where he caught a ball over the middle and bounced off a guy, spun off another one, ripped through another arm tackle, and then ran down the sideline. I mean, that was the play where you're like, okay, all right. I mean, this is not just a gadget like speedster, which I think at this stage in his career, like that's Keon Mosey. He's straight end-to-end speed, but like Deuce, vision, elusiveness, and some power actually to go with it for his frame. I mean, man, it's really exciting. I thought the other play that really stands out, the touchdown run that he had, just the vision and the ability to kind of hide behind the line and get skinny and just squirt through that hole that didn't look that big, and then bam, he's through it and it's wide open, smooth sailing. I mean, those two plays really were the wow plays to me, even as much as the long 70 whatever yarder that was.
Yeah, John, I always tend to roll my eyes when people make Darren Sproles comparisons anytime Kansas State gets a smaller running back in stature with some elusivity. But I tell you what, Deuce Vaughn is as close as it gets really to Darren Sproles. And I think what we saw yesterday, I thought Courtney Messingham adjusted really well in the second half with the offense, and they started to utilize him over the middle of the field on those angle routes. And really, the way they were utilizing him is the way that the Chargers and the Philadelphia Eagles utilized Darren Sproles in the passing game, during his long, lengthy NFL career. They were getting him in space. They were running simple angle routes, getting him matched up on linebackers, which is impossible to cover for those guys, and just getting him out in the open field and letting him make moves and run. And so I think K-State, if they continue to do that, that's the perfect way to utilize him. Give him 6 to 8 carries a game and get him 5 to 6 balls in space in the passing game each game. And, Corey, you mentioned that the running backs were the best receivers yesterday. K-State's wide receivers combined for 77 yards receiving out of the 334 yards in that game. Keon Mosey obviously had the 78-yarder, and then Deuce Vaughn with 129. Those two combined for 5 catches and 207 yards in that game. So, I mean, to your point, that's almost 40 yards per reception that those guys had. They were definitely the stars that really shined in that game. And if you want to look at a bright side again, and hopefully it comes around and these guys become more consistent, but you won that game with getting nothing from Malik Knowles and Joshua Youngblood, and Joaquin Gill had maybe 9 or 10 yards receiving. I mean, 3 of your top receivers did nothing in that game. And you still found a way to win and come up with explosive plays. And you know you've got other weapons in Knowles that you hope you can utilize here down the road. So I think that just kind of talks about the ceiling of this offense, that they were able to do what they did and still not get production from guys you usually count on.
Yeah, totally agree. It makes them so much harder to game plan for in the future with those guys as threats coming out of the backfield. And that was fun to watch. That was really fun to watch. And I really felt like that was more of, when you talk about going back to like when Coach was at North Dakota State, you saw a lot of that from them. They were a lot of things where they're running and then, ducking guys out of the backfield out of similar formations and things. So that was fun to see. You mentioned the defense earlier, both of you. It was surprising to see Spencer Rattler go from like can't miss for the at least the first half and halfway through the third quarter to like he couldn't complete a pass, totally rattled in the pocket. K-State started getting home with the pass rush, and it totally changed the momentum of the game. He was the one that lost composure. Do you think at some point Oklahoma maybe suffered a little bit from the fact that he played like a quarter and a half in that first game in his first go round, and then now you've got to go 4 quarters. It's a close game. The pressure's on, and he just hadn't been in that situation. Is this potentially one where maybe the OU coaching staff wishes they'd have got maybe a little bit more for real reps for their young quarterback right out of the gate?
I think it's more to me about what kind of reps he got against Missouri State, because they were not pressuring him. Like I think what he needed was a game where he actually had to deal with a lot of pass rush and some adversity happening in a game. And it wasn't even so much that it was totally the adversity, because they he threw an interception on his first drive, for instance, and then threw another one in the first half to Justin Gardner. Like they went through some legitimate adversity and he was okay, but it was just once K-State started getting pressure. I mean, the switch flipped about midway through the third quarter where they started getting pressure on him, and that is what bothered him because he is so deadly accurate. But if you get him on the move, it throws it off just enough. I mean, this is where people talk about his release looking like Patrick Mahomes, and I get it, like he does. But the thing that separates him from where Patrick Mahomes is at right now is you get Patrick Mahomes moving just a little bit off platform like that, he can still throw BBs, and he's going to hit Tyreek Hill 70 yards down the field into double coverage. Spencer Rattler's not there yet. So you get him off balance like that, and all of a sudden you start to see some incompletions. And I thought one play that was really telling actually was a very frustrating one at the time and felt like kind of a backbreaker. K-State was still down by 7, and it was the 3rd and 15 where he's shadow of his own goal line. And he rolled out to his right, made a nice throw, completed it for a first down. But I remember Joel Klatt commenting, okay, he really left the pocket way too early here. He didn't need to do that. He made that play more difficult than it had to be. That, to me, I think was pretty telling in retrospect, because he was starting to feel the constant pressure that he was getting. So he was immediately bailing out of the pocket because he felt like he knew what was coming. And that's when I think you really knew K-State had him. Maybe at the time it didn't feel that great because they had moved the chains and I felt like a missed opportunity. But in reality, I think that was when you knew K-State's pass rush really had him.
Yeah, he rolled out to the right a lot in that second half. And actually, Oklahoma, by design, designed 2 rollouts on a 3rd down and 4th down play to the right, which, interestingly enough, was Wyatt Hubert's side of the field that they were rolling the pocket to. And the reason I bring that up is Khalid Duke was in their backfield so much going up against their left tackle that they started to roll the pocket away from Khalid Duke because they sensed him chasing after him, and that pressure really got to him. It gets back to my point that Khalid Duke was the best defensive lineman on the field for either team yesterday. It cannot be understated how big it was having him back on the field. And, you look at a guy like Duke, the ceiling is so high. It's incredibly high. This is a kid out of Georgia who's a redshirt freshman who played receiver in high school. He was a 6'4", 220-pound kid. If you go to the spotlight videos on Rivals.com and look at his highlights, he's playing receiver. And here he is at defensive end just 2 years into college and looking like he could play in the NFL as a D end. I mean, he's only 245 pounds now, but he's getting bigger. He's obviously bulked up some. He's quick. you know, I thought he was just great yesterday, and I really think he was one of the keys to the game. And then it gets back to, you know, Spencer Rattler, like Corey said, he hasn't been in that situation before. And so that was a unique circumstance. Once the game got tighter, you put more pressure on him. K-State starts to bring more pressure, and then we see how he reacts. And, you know, he obviously didn't react as well. He started the game 24 of 26 passing. He finished at 6 of 15 with an interception after that. I mean, they clearly got to him. They rattled him some. They got him on the move, like you said, John, and he wasn't nearly as accurate. And I think this is one of the advantages that we talked about early in the year, playing Oklahoma early in the season, is that this would only be his second game under his belt. He's a redshirt freshman kid who hasn't really played, and he only played really a half of football against Missouri State. And the competition comes up. He faces a much better defense. K-State gets the game tight. You see how he responds. He didn't respond well, and K-State outscores them 14-0 over the last 17 minutes. And I just want to mention one quick stat, guys, about how this run has been so insane against Oklahoma the last 2 years. Last year, K-State outscored them 41-6 in a stretch of 34 minutes in that football game. This year, in a stretch of nearly 18 minutes, they outscore them 24-0. If you combine that, K-State outscored Oklahoma in over 52 minutes of football in two stretches, 65-6. All right, they held them to no touchdowns. You don't go on scoring runs against Oklahoma like that because their offense is so elite and high-powered. Yet K-State shut them out for a 34-minute stretch last year and then for a 17, 18-minute stretch this year. I mean, it's just crazy impressive what K-State's defense has done, and then the offense as well, scoring 65 points in a 52-minute window. I mean, it's just absurd.
Well, now you get to move ahead, and I know the K-State's turnaround from game 1 to game 2 is pretty impressive. Well, Texas Tech is up next, and they did the same thing. They were like squeak one home against Houston Baptist in week number 1, which seems unbelievable. And they had Texas beat yesterday and somehow managed to give up, 2 scores in the last 3 minutes of the game, goes to overtime. And Texas Tech loses to Texas in overtime. But, I mean, you knew it was a Big 12 game because it had a basketball score, 63-56 in overtime. But holy cow, Texas Tech, again, putting up crazy points. This is going to be an interesting game next week. How much of this carryover do you think works for K-State? It's going to be a similar kind of potential shootout game. What do you look for Cats Red Raiders next week?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be a pretty good game. I would expect a close game because, much as I made fun of Texas Tech for almost losing to a team that plays in a CBS parking lot in Houston Baptist, I knew that there would be overreaction to that and there would be some overcorrection, course correction back this week, and that was there against Texas. So, I mean, I think they're capable enough. I think K-State should win the game, but I don't think this will be any kind of cakewalk. And, Texas Tech still has a good quarterback in Alan Bowman. When he's healthy, I mean, he can really sling it. I think they obviously still have some skill weapons. Their defense, K-State should be able to move the ball in their defense. I think that's an area where they're still with Matt Wells trying to overhaul things and get it going where they want it to go. But I would imagine, Texas Tech is going to be a reasonably confident team. I know they just blew that game, but to actually have Texas beat and play a lot better in week 2, I think that'll do a lot for their confidence, much like K-State's confidence should be riding quite a bit higher after what they did on Saturday against Oklahoma. So I would expect a pretty good game, and I think Texas Tech, I don't think this is anything where K-State, the expectation should be for K-State to roll over them. I mean, I don't know. We'll see what the Vegas line would be. I'd imagine maybe K-State -5, 6,
4, 5, yeah.
Like that. Yeah, what do you think, Cole?
Yeah, I would definitely think it'd be under a touchdown. It's just so hard to predict week to week. You guys know that right now with everything going on, and if a position group gets hit at K-State or Texas Tech, what the impact of that might be. It's also hard to predict what Texas Tech's mindset will be coming off a heartbreaking loss like that to Texas. I mean, to be up by 15 points, to come all the way back because they were down most of that game until late in the third quarter, and then they rallied. They were down by 10 plus points, and then they go on a 28-3 run to take that 15-point lead. There's 3 minutes, 13 seconds left in the game, up 15 when they're kicking off. And Texas, yeah. I went upstairs and I came down and Texas just scored a touchdown and I was only upstairs for 1 minute. And so I'm like, well, okay, we'll see what happens here. And Texas Tech's defense had been good most of that second half until that happened. And then the onside kick happens and then you kind of felt it snowballing. And you knew if Texas got it in the end zone to tie it up, they'd probably win it overtime because it's just so hard to overcome that mentally to blow a lead like that late. And so, but yeah, Texas Tech's going to be hard. I mean, they're going to test K-State's secondary just as much as Oklahoma did. TJ Vasher, he's 6'6", 215 pounds, a guy that's going to play in the NFL. Texas had trouble stopping him yesterday. And, you think about Jonathan Adams, who was 6'3", 220 pounds. Look, this is going to be a different type of animal that K-State's going to have to go against. They struggled against a bigger bodied receiver and Jonathan Adams. Can they recover? Who covers Vasher? Because, he's going to have a huge size advantage against K-State's secondary, but this is a secondary that we already talked about that stepped up so huge yesterday. And I was going through the list. We all know Oklahoma is extremely talented all over the football field, but if you go through the list, 6 of their top 8 pass catchers yesterday in that game were all ranked in their respective recruiting classes in the top 250 players in the country. 4 of them were in the top 100. 2 of them were in the top 30. All right, these were elite guys that K-State's rolling out. Boydo, who's never played, and he looks great. And the open field tackling of the secondary, that really stood out to me. I thought Ross Elder and other guys and Boydo and A.J. Parker out in space. It's so hard to tackle those guys for OU in space, and they were great. From a fundamental aspect, that secondary was so good. And, one more thing on this that I'll bring up is the thing you have to feel encouraged about is you're finding out about more and more guys in the program right now because of COVID that may have never gotten their shot. Like maybe the light just clicked on. Maybe in practice they weren't very good. Maybe nothing shined on them and they were never going to get their shot. But because of COVID, they were forced to step in. When the light shined, they stepped up. And now they have that confidence to know that they can do this. You think about Boydo, he's only a sophomore. There's plenty of time for him to still play. Terrence Newman didn't start shining until his junior year. He was mostly a backup corner by then. Jalen Pickle, a sophomore, another guy that I basically given up on. It seems silly because he's only a sophomore. They have young players that are getting to play so much. I talked about it. 19 sophomores and freshmen played multiple snaps on both sides of football yesterday. They're building depth for the future. And that's the bright side of this, because if COVID hits again a position group, you've got other guys now that can step up.
Well, it's going to be weird. I think Big 12 as a whole moving forward. I don't know who the best team in the Big 12 is right now. It looks like maybe Oklahoma State, but I think that's going to change week to week. It should be pretty exciting. I think that there's not going to be a team that's really, quote, out of it every week, short of, well, perhaps Kansas. But other than that, it should be for some fun football games as you move through the schedule. Let's take a quick jump, talk a little NFL today, and we'll wrap up our Sunday look. NFL this weekend is nuts. Not only do you get Seahawks Cowboys today, which should be a shootout, fun, Green Bay and the Saints tonight, but Monday Night Football is the Chiefs and the Ravens in a rematch of what could potentially be game of the year in week number 3 in the NFL. This is nuts.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty darn fun. Now, I will point out the Chiefs have beaten the Ravens each of the last 2 years, right? They've handled them. I think there have been – I was doing a podcast the other day. They were asking me about the Chiefs and Ravens, and it just felt like these questions about what's wrong with Kansas City's defense. Boy, the offense doesn't look like it's clicking quite yet. I'm like, geez, are we really going to overreact that much to one game against the Chargers last week? Yeah, they found a way to win, and they've got 15. That's the thing that – if I'm going to play my role as Arrogant Chiefs fan, it's like, what do I have to fear? What deficit do I ever have to fear as a Chiefs fan? It's now 5 or 6 in a row where they've trailed, and we know the story of the playoff games, how much they've been behind in some of those games. But it'll be an amazing matchup. You have obviously the two of the 3 best quarterbacks in the game right now. I don't want to leave Russell Wilson out of it, but Lamar against Patrick Mahomes, and then on top of that, about Harrison Butker against Justin Tucker. The 2 best kickers in the game as well, if it's going to come down to something at the last minute. So there's a lot that's really fascinating there. Do I worry about the Chiefs' run defense against Baltimore running the ball? Absolutely I do. But in the end, man, you asked me who's going to win this game. I'm not picking against the Chiefs with Mahomes playing quarterback for them.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. John's the most confident Chiefs fan that there is. And I'm the one that's usually a little more pessimistic during the game. So I need John usually to boost me up in the group text that we're in. And last week, John kept saying, I'm not worried. And then I would be like, well, I'm starting to get pretty worried. They're not driving the ball at all. and they eventually step up. And you do know if you get – it's fun to have a quarterback and an offense where you know if they punt the ball back to him late in the game and you're down by one score or less, you're probably going to win the football game or find a way to score. So it's fun to be on that side of things, which we haven't historically had as Chiefs fans in the past. And so but the thing that worries you when you play the Ravens is Harbaugh will go for it on fourth down whenever he wants at any point of the field. And it just seems like it would be so hard to stop those guys. If they just committed to running the ball 4 straight times with the dual threat capabilities of Lamar Jackson, how do you stop them from getting 10 yards? And so I'm concerned about the run defense. I'm also concerned about the pass defense, and not because L'Jarius Sneed has been really good at one corner position, but K-State still down K-State, the Chiefs down Bashad Breeland, and then Charvarius Ward. I don't know if he's going to play with a cast on his hand or not in that game, but it's hard if you're playing without your 2 top corners against Lamar when he can certainly throw the ball, and they throw it to their tight ends a lot and out of the backfield. So I would probably, and John will roll his eyes at me, and this is probably a good thing for Chiefs fans, including myself. I'll pick the Ravens to win this game, which probably means the Chiefs are going to win.
I think that's fine. Like I don't have a problem with picking the Ravens to win, and they may well win. I still think at the end of the day, in a playoff scenario, I'd feel better about the Chiefs' chances. I still think that, at the end of the day, they're the reigning Super Bowl champs, and I haven't seen anything to knock me off course. Even a regular season loss at Baltimore wouldn't do that to me. And I would also make the point that I get Russell Wilson is great. I get Lamar Jackson is great, and he's been awesome. But another discussion I heard that tweaked me as arrogant Chiefs fan, John, was, I don't remember who it was, but saying, everybody thinks that Patrick Mahomes is head and shoulders above the rest of the quarterbacks in the league. He's not. Lamar Jackson is right there. I mean, I roll my eyes big time at that. Russell and Lamar are great. Patrick Mahomes is head and shoulders above those two.
Well, I don't think there's anybody that if you were restarting a team wouldn't pick him right away as like your guy, right? Like if you're redrafting the league and you had the number 1 pick, like that's the dude, right? No.
Yeah, full stop. Like Patrick Mahomes is by far the best quarterback in the NFL, full stop.
Yeah. Well, it should be fun. Give me all of Cowboys and Seahawks this afternoon, and then Monday night will be a great time too. I look forward to this next week as Cats take on Texas Tech, and should be a fun one. But yeah, man, what an interesting turnaround when the little blurb in the corner of your Apple TV jumps up and says, "Hey, it's a close game. You better believe it. Don't give up on these games at halftime, folks. There's a whole lot of football to be played. K-State's a lot of fun right now. So should be a fun season. Gentlemen, have a great weekend, and we'll see you in a week."
Thanks,
Sounds good.